buy or lease rules in the morning.
Welcome to another episode of Director Showcase. I'm B-Movie Paul.
And I'm Phantom Dark Dave.
This week we are wrapping up Tod Browning month with a review of the cult classic horror film Freaks from 1932. So let's get right into it. The description of this movie from IMDb says, a circus's beautiful trapeze artist agrees to marry the leader of sideshow performers, but his deformed friends discover she is only marrying him for his inheritance. So Dave, what did you think of Tod Browning's Freaks?
Can a full-grown woman truly love a midget? In this movie, hell no.
Yeah, unfortunately, which is a shame, because I liked Hans. I thought he was a good guy.
Oh, he's such a cool dude. You know, it's so funny because there's such a big controversial factor over this film, but also whether it is truly a horror film. Everywhere you look, it's a drama or a horror, so we just call it a dramatic horror film. You cool with that?
Pretty much, it sounds about right. Yeah, because it's not. Most of it's not really horror. It's basically more of a suspenseful drama. Yeah,
and you know, if we sit there and we think about all the movies we've been watching and researching with Tod Browning, every single one of his movies is so like overly dramatic. You know, like if it wasn't for just a few of the elements in the movie, he would not be a horror director, you know?
Oh yeah, he knew how to like combine genres and knew how to basically add different twists to a film that would make it just that much more suspenseful and entertaining.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of how he ends his movies. I think more times than not, after I see it, I'm like, that's a Tod Browning ending.
Yeah, everything's normally pretty wrapped up. Like, it'll be wrapped up in an unusual way, but it's normally a pretty satisfying ending.
You know, I don't know if they do this or not, but I would be so interested in, like, some sort of Tod Browning motion picture, you know, like the life of Tod Browning. Not like an A&E biography, even though that would be okay too, but like, you know, like they did like Ed Wood, and they made a full movie about the life of, you know, and everything. Oh man.
That would be cool. He's definitely an interesting character.
Well, yeah, because, you know, the thing that works so much with this movie is the fact that Tod Browning, he had firsthand experience, you know, with the carny life. Because when he ran away from home, he joined the circuits and was around some of these folks, you know. So just, oh, man, being able to see something like that, like a recreation of that, I think would just be awesome.
Definitely. I'd like to hear more of his story, or at least, like, I think seeing it played out in front of an audience would be a really interesting experience.
Yeah, because, you know, not too long ago they did the Hitchcock movie where Anthony Hopkins played Alfred Hitchcock, and it was all about the controversy of the Psycho film. How cool would it be if they did the same thing but with the controversy of Freaks?
There you go. I'd like to see that. It would have a sad ending though, just because his career kind of ended after that.
And, you know, there was still a couple of good movies after that, but you're right. And here's the reason why. I truly, you know, one, Tod Browning was way ahead of his time. People were not ready for Tod Browning, but I think what happened was Dracula was so successful. They expected another type of movie like Dracula. And here he comes out with Freaks. I mean, it's called Freaks. You know, how could you not expect something crazy and quote-unquote freaky, right? But it's sad, man, to think that this fantastic movie. So, yeah, what do I think? Fantastic movie was a nail in the coffin for him.
Definitely. Yeah, I like the fact that this movie largely was like kind of a slice of life film, and it takes place in an unusual setting with the traveling circus and seeing the sideshow performers. And I really like how it humanized the characters. It kind of showed them just like living their lives like normal people, and at the time and even now it doesn't really happen that much. Like a lot of them are still laughed at and things like that. So I thought this movie did a really good job of creating characters that you really cared about and liked, and I think the fact that they were all sideshow performers really made you sympathize with them and really made you kind of care about them, not so much care about them a little bit more, but kind of understand that there's something that they were going through and have to face that most of us really don't, at least to that extent.
Yeah, that's well said too, because one thing I was thinking about is when I'm watching this movie, I'm like, wow, what's some great characters. but it's like, but they're not characters. I mean, this is who they are, and it really just puts things in perspective. And it's kind of like typical. And I hate to make the wrong reference on this, but just as we're talking, I'm kind of spitballing it. You think of characteristics like the whole, Beauty and the Beast and things like that. Like in this movie, so many people judge a book by its cover, right? And some of these people have a bigger heart than even I could ever have. Some of the most wonderful folks in this movie. And I was doing some research on some of the actors and actresses, and some of them even kept the same name. I mean, it was literally just verbatim right there.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I think the ending of this film, like spoilers for whoever hasn't seen this, but in order to save Hans, the sideshow performers all kind of get together and they take down the trapeze artist. They turn her into like a chicken person or something like that. It was real bizarre, but it showed that they were all really loyal to each other and they all genuinely cared about each other. So not only did it show them as human, it showed that there was a quality to them that was also noble and respectable. And I think that was a very good way of tying things together and kind of like solidifying like what the film was trying to show.
Yeah, definitely. And to go right along with their loyalty, I mean, think about there's this scene in here when, Hans actually marries her, right? And they're having like the wedding reception, the ceremony deal where all the sideshow people and everybody's just sitting around the dinner table having what looks like a good time. But then we're quickly introduced to the fact the reason she's laughing and having a good time is because she's playing Hans for a fool. And it's so sad because all the other folks there are, they're called freaks, right? And they know that they're different, but they look at her who, maybe they look at her like, wow, she's perfect or whatnot. It's like when you look at one of these characters and you accept them from who they are, it's the acceptance, right? But what's crazy is it's the freaks in this movie are accepting her because she's not a freak. And there's just something so like heartfelt about it, right? And then it's just heartbreaking because she pretty much just like throws wine in their faces because she's like, I'll never be like you. You guys are a bunch of fools,
Oh yeah, we get that great scene of them sitting at the table and they're like, one of us, one of us. I love that scene. It's great. But yeah, it kind of flips that whole like accepting somebody different thing on its head because they didn't really need her approval or her acceptance. Like they were offering their acceptance to her and she rejected it because of who they were. But they were much better people than she was. They had their community, they had their friendships and relationships and all that. And this is their world. They weren't asking for. I mean, I know I'm sure they all wanted to be accepted by other people, but they were their own people. Like they didn't really ask for sympathy. It showed a lot of like good qualities and kind of noble qualities with them, and just like kind of being sure of who you are, even though you're well aware. Well, most of them are well aware of the fact that they're different. I mean, I think the pinheads aren't really super aware because they have a lot of developmental issues, but you see the human worm who lights his own cigarette without arms and legs, which is just the coolest scene in any film. It's like they just lived their lives. They weren't looking for your pity or anything. It's just like, yeah, that's who they are.
Yeah, and some interesting people in this movie. You mentioned that guy there, the worm guy, right? And then you had like Johnny Ick, who was like the half boy,
Yeah.
And then you had the living torso. You had the bearded lady who was in love with the human skeleton. The guy that was like just ultra bony, and then they had a kid together. So you had all these like side stories within the big plot. You had the conjoined twins, and that whole thing. And it's amazing that this movie is barely over an hour, and there's so much going on.
Oh yeah, it just kind of gives you a glimpse into just a world that most people kind of overlook. I mean, at the time, I know freak shows were kind of dying out. They weren't as acceptable to kind of like point and laugh at, which is a good thing, but it was a world that I don't think most people really thought of. Like after the performances, I think most people went home and didn't think about any of them again, but this kind of just showed it, and I thought it was real nice. It wasn't trying to make you feel bad for them. It was just trying to like make them human. It was telling a story that really isn't that unique. A woman marrying a man for his money and plans to kill him. Like, it's not that unique of a story, but the fact that Tod Browning placed it in this traveling circus and made his characters sideshow performers, it just added that element of, like, not only was it unusual, but it also very much depended and was dictated by the inherent complexities and peculiarities of a setting like that and characters like that. And I think it just added a lot of depth to it and made it very unique.
Yeah, and speaking of, so we didn't really get into it, but her point or her plan is to poison Hans so that way he dies. And initially, yeah, Hans gets poisoned, but then he catches on to what's going on, so he doesn't take future doses of the poison. He just pretends to. And that's when he, coincides with the sideshow, his family, basically. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to take this no more. She's got to go. And one thing I found amazing about it is the love story in here is between Hans and his fiance before he gets married. Like the girl is like, I don't know how long, if they mentioned how long they've been together, but basically, Hans, he plays a midget. That's his thing, right? And there is there's a female who's also a midget, and they're just in cahoots together. And it's beautiful. I mean, she loves him to death, and he loves her, but he feels like there's this other angel in front of him, But man, the fact that they in real life are brother and sister is mind blown.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a little odd, but it worked really well. Harry Earls, the guy who played Hans, he's been in at least one other Tod Browning film. I know he was in The Unholy Three, and he did a really good job in that one too. And yeah, it was definitely interesting because you could tell Hans was kind of insecure about his state in the world, like being a midget and all that. Like, he was really the only that kind of showcased insecurity about being a sideshow performer. And through how everyone kind of comes together for him, you see that he kind of learns to accept that, and that he is, despite being a sideshow performer, he's pretty fortunate to have like all those people in his life. And it was kind of nice just seeing his character development, his kind of understanding, because it kind of reflects the audience in a lot of ways. It reflects that, like, we're seeing a group and kind of learning to accept them. And let's be honest, it's kind of hard to watch this film and then feel bad about, like, oh man, I look like crap today. It's like, oh, well, at least you have both your arms and legs. Like, here's this guy, like, living his life, rolling cigarettes and stuff like that. Like, are you really gonna complain? It's like, he's still a really cool character, and so are all these guys. And yeah, that's the one thing about this movie. You can't watch it without kind of feeling bad about all the times you complain about, like, stupid stuff.
Yeah, and with that, something you said, with Hans being insecure, and then everybody else just, I mean, you have a few here and there, but for the most part, everybody else just used it as a strength. They were who they were, and they rolled with it, and it didn't matter. You know what I mean? They were a family, and because that loyalty, like you said, was there, the things that united them as a family in the end is what really made them succeed.
Oh yeah, they were all complete people. They knew where they were, like, who they were, and they weren't ashamed of it. And I think at the end it kind of like helped Hans kind of come to terms with who he was, and it really isn't anything to be ashamed. I mean, it's not his fault, and he can still live a good life.
Yeah, and we talked about how it's not really a horror movie, but man, like, when you get down to the last, maybe 20 minutes or so, that's when things take a turn. Whenever they seek their revenge, it starts pouring down raining, and then you see all the freaks just like crawling and walking towards you. That's when things get a little scary.
Oh yeah, especially, like, once again, I know you keep pointing to him, but the human worm, the guy without the arms and legs, he's got this knife in his mouth. I think he was crawling under the train through the mud. That was scary. Like, I would not mess with that guy.
Yeah, and they kind of sugarcoated the end of it, because I don't remember if it was MGM Studio or if it was just someone else, but Somebody was like, we can't end like this. We need to throw something else, something to make you smile at the end of this movie. And so they did the whole scene where Hans, it's like, this is all past now, and he's in his mansion. He's got his inheritance and everything.
He's fixed his relationship with his first fiance, and yeah, from what I remember, they originally, like, one of the reasons they added that scene was because Hans, when he kind of discovered that he was being poisoned, they realized at the end that he kind of came off as being really vindictive. It adds that when he was approaching her, he wanted her to confess and like apologize. He wasn't actually looking for what ended up happening, and it kind of I think it kind of worked. I mean, I wouldn't have blamed him. I kind of thought it was cooler, like with him, just like, oh, you're gonna try to kill me? Well, now you're human chicken, so.
Which, man, you keep saying chicken. Was it chicken or was it duck?
Chicken or a duck? I can't remember. I think you're right. It was a duck. I don't know why I keep saying chicken. Cause
Either way, you can eat it at a French restaurant.
Pretty much. What a bizarre ending, though. Like.
Oh yeah, for sure. What a Tod Browning ending.
Oh yeah. It's like it's a nice ending, but it's slightly off. Where it's like, okay, things are still aren't quite normal, but for the most part, it ended happily.
For a movie about a sideshow, this is an acceptable ending.
Oh, yeah.
But I have to ask you, because we do this in every episode, does Paul nitpick this movie?
Let's see. I've been thinking about this since I watched it again, and I can't really think of too much to nitpick. I mean, I did think that the ending of it was so epic that I kind of wish other parts of it were like that, but I think the movie overall, by not doing that, told a better story, so I can't even really nitpick that. Overall, I can't really find much to complain about.
And that's okay. I mean, it's a slow build with a big end. I mean, you can't.
I will say that, like, there were parts where, like, I was pissed at Hans through good portions of it, because I empathized with him. I really did. Like, him feeling like, well, a freak for most of his life, and, like, he gets this validation that he never thought he'd get. But, man, you see, like, his first fiance, and she's just so nice and so caring and loves him so much that you just want to smack him in the face, be like, listen, dude, you're making her cry. Like, get your shit together, man.
It was just a prime example of, him thinking the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah, which I totally get, and I think it worked well, but I felt bad for her. I think her name in real life is Daisy Earls, Harriet Earls' sister, like you said. I thought she did a great job. Like, she looks so childlike, even though she's not. And like when she's talking and like trying to get Hans to come to his senses, like you really feel for her, and it made me dislike Hans a bit. I'm not gonna lie. I can empathize, I can understand.
Oh yeah.
But I was cool with him for a good portion of the film.
That's okay. He came to his senses finally. So.
Oh yeah. So if you had to rate this film, what would you give it?
I'm gonna go 8.5.
I give this a 9. So pretty close.
Yeah. Not too bad.
Since this is the end of Tod Browning Month, we get to pick out our top 5 favorite Tod Browning films. So, our top 5. We each have a list. Dave, you can go first, and then I'll give my list. Once again, these aren't films necessarily that we've reviewed this month, but films by Tod Browning that we've watched relatively recently and that we think rank above his other films. What do you have for your list?
Okay. So I'm a big Tod Browning fan. This was really hard to do. I had to get really specific in my reasoning. So here we go. Number 5, The Devil Doll. I thought it was visually awesome and very charming. Number 4, Outside the Law, a movie we did not get to discuss. I love it because my favorite actor, Lon Chaney's in it. He plays 2 roles. He gets to play a ruthless thug and a Chinese servant. But the movie features everything from greed, theft, passion, and revenge. Not to mention, you see a side of Lon Chaney that's just makes you want to cry. Number 3, Freaks. No other movie shows the carny life better than this. A must-see because it's a controversial film and it's very underappreciated. Number 2, The Unknown. just barely beating Freaks because Lon Chaney is an armless knife thrower. It's mesmerizing to watch his character go from hero to villain and just wonder the whole time, is it a motive out of his own heart? Can you really be that bad when you kill out of love? Yes, you can. And my number one Tod Browning film, a movie we did not get to talk about, The Blackbird. I love The Blackbird. It is like a 9.5 for me. It's such a good movie. There's so much morals in it. But basically, another movie where Lon Chaney plays a double life. He plays like an underground criminal, and then he disguises himself as the criminal's brother, who is a crippled priest. And we talk about Lon Chaney and how he's able to like do things to his body to make himself look like he has a disformability or something of that nature, and he does it again in this, being very mesmerizing on his crutches that he is and going up and down the stairs. But like any Tod Browning Lon Chaney movie, it's dramatic. He falls in love for a girl, and he tries to use both of his identities to impress her because he figures either the bad boy's going to get her or the good boy's going to get her. And it has a very memorable ending. So I'll leave it with that. But for number one for me, The Blackbird.
Nice. Very good choices. The Blackbird is one film I really want to watch. I looked everywhere for that film, like around, so I can watch it, but I was unsuccessful in my search. I'm gonna just keep looking, and once I watch it, I may change my list. But I had to exclude that one just because I was unable to find it in time. So for my list, I started with number 5 was a film that we didn't get to review, but I really ended up enjoying it. It's West of Zanzibar, where also starring Lon Chaney. It's another silent film where he plays a guy who ends up crippled by a guy who was having an affair with his wife, and he comes up with this plan for revenge where it's real messed up, but he this woman who he thinks is the guy who crippled him, his daughter, him and his wife's illegitimate child, and he gets her involved in drugs and all this other stuff, and then it turns out that's his daughter, and he ends up kind of making amends for it. He ends up saving her life, but man, just seeing Lon Chaney play this sadistic, vengeful person, and then just his reaction when he's realizes how badly he screwed up was really something. For number 4, I picked Mark of the Vampire. Now, I'll admit part of this is because I was imagining this as London After Midnight as an actual film, but it wasn't quite what I imagine London After Midnight would have been based on what I've seen from the still frames. And, man, you just can't replace Lon Chaney, not even with Bela Lugosi, who is basically playing Dracula again, or playing a guy who's playing Dracula. But it had an interesting twist, and I enjoyed it overall. It was different from what I was expecting, and a lot of people don't really like the twist because it people argue whether or not that's a horror film, kind of like with Freaks, because it ends up becoming a mystery drama. But I kind of like the way it went. I thought it was good that they separated it from just enough from London After Midnight, because without Lon Chaney, I don't think that film should have really been remade completely. For number 3, I picked The Unholy Three. This is kind of like a mix between The Unknown and Freaks, because it takes 3 circus performers. They decide to start a fake pet shop and basically scam people. Lon Chaney plays a ventriloquist. Harry Earls is in it. He plays, a performing midget. And then there's the strongman, and they all kind of use their skills to basically scam people. And it was really entertaining in the way they did it, the way they utilized their skills. And this is the end, Lon Chaney's character, I believe his name is Echo, and he's watching this guy on trial for a crime that they committed, a murder that the other 2 committed, and he was involved with, but didn't really plan it, and just feeling guilty and not sure what to do because his girlfriend's in love with the guy who's being put on trial. So he eventually comes clean, but his this reaction, like with that moral dilemma, was very well performed, and overall it was really interesting film. It definitely put a nice twist on the like kind of scam sort of thing. For number two, I picked The Unknown. I thought that was such a unique idea, having a guy living a double life as a thief and an armless guy in a sideshow, and just the way it was made. Lon Chaney, as always, was an amazing actor, and I just really liked the way it played out. Like, it was unexpected and really kind of depressing at times, but it told a really solid story. And number one, I had to go with, of course, Freaks. I love this film. I think it just shows such a large group of characters. It just makes them all so likable. It shows them as really being human, relatable, and just overall just likable. And it comes together so well, like where they all show like this loyalty to each other that is just really admirable. And it was unique. It was respectable for the people that they were showing. And it's such a shame that at the time it was so frowned upon, because it really is a great film. And I would recommend it to really anybody who just wants to watch a good film, and especially if you're a Tod Browning fan.
Two things. Between the combination of your list and my list, there's two movies where a man dresses up like a woman.
That's true, yeah. We've got the Unholy Three and
Devil Doll.
Yeah.
And then two, it makes you really wonder if Freaks had been made today. And yeah, I know American Horror Story, right? But if it had been made today with as much passion as he put into that film there, I would not be surprised if it was nominated for some sort of artsy award, man.
Oh yeah, it would definitely deserve it.
It's so disappointing that people couldn't handle it back then, but hey man, it was the 30s, what are you going to do?
Oh yeah. One of the things about Freaks and why I made it number one was, I think as far as Tod Browning films go, he tends to take a normal, like, kind of cliche plot, like, somebody's got a heist or, a murder plan, but he places it in an unusual circumstance or provides characters that have unusual abilities, and it just changes the story so much. Like, he definitely went into detail of how would this play out if we changed a few elements of this story and everything. And it's like watching him unfold like a mystery, or like he's planning some kind of heist, and it's like, okay, if it's me, a guy who doesn't have arms, or a ventriloquist, or a midget, or a strongman doing some kind of heist, like let's say we're robbing a bank, how would this play out? And like you can tell he's like playing it out in his head, and it's really fun to watch. Like, he just knew how to make a film that may not have been the most creative idea, even in the 1930s or 1920s, but just he put such a twist on it that it just felt so original. And I think that's something that was really unique to Tod Browning.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at some of them, you can tell that a lot of these stories he had, he did the best he could visually, and I believe he succeeded, and you believe he succeeded, but a lot of them, man, I bet were just awesome novels, and short stories of his own. Like, even London After Midnight, the only reason it didn't make my top five is because I haven't seen the film. I've only seen the slideshow.
Yeah, it's definitely a shame. And even that one, like, the way he, like, kind of played around with vampires, having them kind of instrumental in solving a mystery, like having the whole hypnosis thing. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, you don't really see something quite like that, where somebody's using their talents that are normally meant for something else in a unique situation. And I think he pulled that off probably better than most other directors.
I agree. Now, we've concluded Tod Browning month, and you just talked about how Tod Browning was able to do things with his characters. I think that's a perfect way for you to step into telling our audience who the next director is.
Yes, the perfect unintentional segue for our next director, which will be David Cronenberg. For those of you who don't know, David Cronenberg is well known for his usage of body horror in his films, so this will be a very interesting month to say the least.
And even though he didn't direct this movie, a lot of people don't know he was in Jason X. So if you don't know who David Cronenberg is, you go watch Jason X again, and the scene where Jason breaks bad finally and, drowning pool, let the bodies hit the floor, starts playing, and you see this guy just running away, and then he gets impaled. That's David Cronenberg. How ironic. The king of body horror got his body tore up.
Seems fitting.
Go, Jason.
So join us next week as we begin David Cronenberg Month. And what better way to start that month than with a review of the 1986 remake of the film The Fly. If you enjoyed this review, you can check out all our other episodes of Director's Showcase, along with all our other shows at our website, bmoviebros.com, where we post a new show Monday through Saturday. Keep up to date by liking us on Facebook at facebook.com/bmoviebros, or follow us on Twitter at bmoviebros. You can also follow Dave and all his many projects at Phantom Dark Dave, or my personal Twitter at bmoviepaul. Thank you everyone for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed Tod Browning Month. Until next time, have a good night.